At 6:00 a.m., my phone exploded with a 911 dispatch telling me to get off private property. My property because the HOA president said I was trespassing on land her son needed for his children. By the time I stepped outside, I had that sick, familiar feeling in my gut, the one that says, "Oh, this isn't just a neighbor being annoying. This is somebody trying to erase you." And the wild part, she had no idea she'd been harassing the same man she'd been begging the police to remove. Let me back up because this didn't start with sirens. It started with quiet. The kind of quiet you don't even notice until it's gone. 5 years earlier, I bought a 50-acre ranch outside a little Texas town right up against a shiny gated community called Willowbrook Estates. If you've ever driven past one of those places with stone walls, manicured trees, and a security gate that looks like a mini military checkpoint, yeah, that kind of neighborhood. Average house in there cost more than most people make in a decade. My ranch, meanwhile, was all dirt barbed wire, wide open sky, and honest work. I didn't buy it to be cute. I bought it because my little brother Eddie needed somewhere to live that didn't feel like a trap. Eddie came home from Afghanistan missing more than a leg. An IED took the leg, but PTSD took the rest, sleep, peace, trust, all of it. The VA gave him pills that turned him into a ghost and therapy sessions in sterile rooms that smelled like disinfectant and defeat. He was slipping. I could see it the way he'd stare too long at nothing, the way his hands shook when a car door slammed too hard. Then we found the ranch. Something about it. The space, the rhythm of the work, the smell of hay in summer heat. Horses snorting in the morning, cattle moving through tall grass like slow waves. It brought him back. Not all at once, not like a movie, but little pieces. A full night of sleep without screaming. A smile when he brushed down a horse. One day he said, "I can breathe here," and I swear I would have fought a hurricane to keep that peace for him. And then Stella Worthington showed up like a hurricane in designer heels. Stella ran the Willowbrook Estates HOA like she'd been appointed queen by God himself. You know the type? Perfect hair, oversized sunglasses. A smile that's technically a smile, but feels like a knife. She had that exact brand of entitlement that comes from marrying money, collecting titles, and never hearing the word no unless it was said by someone she could sue. She drove a silver BMW that never had a speck of dust on it, which is hilarious because we live in Texas and dust is basically part of the air. But the real problem wasn't even Stella at first. It was her son, Trevor. Trevor Worthington was 32, recently divorced, and suddenly very interested in being a great dad, which was convenient because his ex-wife was in court trying to keep their 3 kids away from him. The way I heard it later, he'd been a hot mess for years. Anger issues, manipulation, the kind of guy who breaks things and then acts shocked when people call him dangerous. But at the time, all I knew was he started acting like my land was his future. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was feeding the horses when I saw fresh tire tracks slicing through my east pasture. Somebody had driven right through my fence line, leaving a gap wide enough for cattle to wander onto the county road and get themselves killed. The tracks led straight toward the boundary with Willowbrook Estates. I fixed the fence, reinforced it. I told myself it was a teenager joyriding, took a wrong turn, panicked. I wanted to believe that, because believing the alternative meant I had a problem that didn't end with a new fence post. That weekend it happened again. This time they didn't crash through. They cut the barbed wire clean, like they brought wire cutters and took their time. Eddie found it during his morning walk, the one routine that kept his anxiety from crawling up his throat. He just stood there staring at the cut wire like it was a snake, and his hands started shaking. I watched his breathing speed up, that tight, controlled breathing he used when he was trying not to spiral, and something cold settled in my chest. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I gathered evidence. I installed motion-activated trail cameras, professional ones, infrared enough memory to catch weeks of activity. If somebody was coming onto my land, I wanted faces. I wanted timestamps. I wanted receipts. And oh, I got them. The cameras caught Trevor Worthington riding a red Yamaha ATV at 2:17 a.m., cutting through my pasture like he owned it. He wasn't lost. He wasn't confused. He was weaving between my cattle, revving the engine loud enough to spook the horses, stopping to take pictures of my barn and equipment shed like he was shopping. One night he brought a buddy. The two of them carried actual surveying equipment, measuring chain stakes and optical level, and they spent 2 hours pounding stakes into my soil like they were laying claim. That's when I made my first mistake. I didn't confront him. I didn't march out there and drag him off my land. I thought evidence first. Do it clean. Do it by the book. I was building a case file in my head the way you do when you've spent your life watching people lie their way out of consequences. Then Wednesday morning at 6:43 a.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was dispatch. "Sir, we got a call about a man illegally occupying property on Meadowbrook Drive. Caller says you're trespassing and threatening her son." I actually laughed one sharp, humorless sound because the audacity hit me like a slap. Me, trespassing, on my own ranch. Deputy Martinez was the one who responded. Good kid, solid cop. I'd trained him myself. He found me in the barn working leather tack, trying to keep my hands busy so my brain didn't go straight to rage. "Share Tom," he corrected himself, glancing around like he wasn't sure what kind of day this was about to be. "We got a weird call. Lady says you're squatting on her son's land." I handed him my tablet with the trail cam footage. He watched Trevor's midnight joyrides, the surveying gear, the clear trespassing. His eyebrows climbed higher with every clip. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "She called 911 because you won't leave your own property while her son is literally sneaking onto your land at night." "Yep," I said. "That's about the size of it." Martinez rubbed his face. "You want me to go talk to her?" "Not yet," I told him. "Let's see how deep this goes." That afternoon, Stella came in person. Her BMW rolled into my driveway like she owned it. She stepped out in a suit that probably cost more than Eddie's monthly disability check, those big sunglasses that posture chin up, shoulders back, like she was entering a courtroom. She saw Eddie first and immediately aimed her voice at him the way people talk to hired help. "Excuse me," she called syrupy sweet. "I'm looking for the property owner. Are you the caretaker?" Eddie, bless him, didn't take the bait. He just nodded politely and said, "I'll get Tom." When I stepped out of the barn in faded jeans, flannel steel-toed boots coated in real dirt, Stella's eyes flicked over me like she was scanning a menu she didn't like. "Mister," she said, waiting for me to fill in the blank. "Bridgewater," I said. "This is my ranch." She smiled like that information was inconvenient but temporary. "I'm Stella Worthington, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. There's been some confusion about property boundaries. My son Trevor needs this land for his children's welfare. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer." "Ma'am," I said, "this property isn't for sale." Her smile twitched. "Everything has a price, Mr. Bridgewater. Perhaps you don't understand the legal complexities involved." I remember the way she said legal complexities like she was holding a loaded gun under the table. A week later, those legal complexities showed up on my porch in the form of court documents. Family Court, Davidson County. A motion full of pretty words about child welfare and suitable housing requirements. The way Stella framed it was genius in a disgusting, manipulative way. She claimed Trevor had 60 days to prove he could provide a stable home for his 3 kids, and that my land was essential to that because of proximity to schools and a therapeutic rural environment. She made it sound like I was some cruel monster denying children a place to live. Eddie read the first page, then looked up at me over his coffee eyes wide. "Tom, are we the bad guys here?" That question hit me harder than I expected. Because Eddie isn't stupid. He's just tender. He's lived through hell. And when you've lived through hell, you don't want to be the reason anyone else suffers, especially kids. For the first time, I felt that tiny worm of doubt. What if I'm being stubborn? What if there's some law I don't know? What if I'm about to get dragged through court and make Eddie's life worse just because I want to win? Then the harassment turned physical. One afternoon I came home and found Eddie standing in the east pasture, frozen, shaking. Fence posts snapped clean at the ground. Wire cut and tangled. My irrigation line, my lifeline, severed in 3 places. Water spraying into mud, turning sections of pasture into swamp. The air smelled like diesel and destruction. "They came in daylight," Eddie said, voice tight. "Big truck, some kind of blade. I couldn't see the driver." I knelt and ran my fingers along the pipe cuts. Clean, precise, not random. Somebody knew exactly what they were doing, exactly what would cost me the most money. Worse. My trail cameras had been disabled, carefully turned to face the ground like whoever did it knew how cameras work. That night, Trevor showed up on my porch. Work boots that had never seen dirt. Concerned expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey man," he said. "Heard you had some trouble with vandals. Real sorry about that. My mom sent me to see if you needed help." The audacity almost made me dizzy. He was offering to fix damage he probably caused, fishing for info, acting like we were neighbors swapping tools. "That's mighty considerate," I said, keeping my voice calm. "What kind of help?" He leaned in like he was sharing a secret. "Look, you can't afford to keep fixing this stuff every time some punks mess with you. My mom knows people in county government. Maybe we can get you security patrols, protect your investment, and maybe work out an arrangement that benefits everyone." Every time. He said every time like he'd already planned the next incident. That's when the helplessness hit me like a wave. Not anger helplessness, because this wasn't just about fences or pipes. This was about Eddie. I watched my brother flinch at every distant engine. I watched him stop doing his morning walks. I watched the peace drain out of him, replaced by that haunted look he had when he first came home from war. And I'll be honest, there was a night after Eddie finally fell asleep from sheer exhaustion when I sat alone on the porch with my head in my hands and thought, maybe I should just sell. Maybe I should take the money, disappear, find another place. Then the ugly thought followed. But what if we can't afford another place? What if Eddie never finds peace again? I remember staring out at the pasture under moonlight, listening to the wind move through the grass and thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm fighting a losing battle against people with money, lawyers' connections, and all I'm doing is dragging my brother back into misery? That was the moment I almost broke. And then my phone rang. Unknown number, Fort Worth area code. A woman's voice, nervous but firm. "Is this Tom Bridgewater? The man with the ranch on Meadowbrook Drive?" "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "My name is Angela Martinez. I used to be Angela Worthington. Trevor's my ex-husband." Something in my chest went still, like the air right before a storm. She didn't waste time. "Mr. Bridgewater, Trevor is lying. He doesn't need your land for custody. He doesn't even have the legal right to overnight visitation. He lost those kids because of domestic violence fraud and, honestly, because he's dangerous. Stella's using the children as a shield. Trevor wants your land for development. Luxury cabins, wedding venue, whatever makes him money." I felt my fingers tighten around the phone. "Do you have proof?" "Court records, police reports, medical records, text messages," she said, voice shaking with anger that sounded like it had been building for years. "I have everything, and I'm sick of him destroying people." When she said she had text messages, messages where Trevor talked about getting the hillbilly off the land, my doubt died right there. Not slowly, not gently. It died like a light switch flipping off. Because it wasn't about kids. It was never about kids. It was about greed. And my brother's pain was just collateral damage. Angela overnighted a package. When it arrived, it was worse than she'd described. A pattern across states. Harassment campaigns. Fake claims. The same playbook, different targets. Trevor and Stella weren't desperate parents. They were predators. And suddenly I didn't feel helpless anymore. I felt clear. I called in favors, quiet ones, the kind you don't announce. A civil engineer buddy named Bobby came out and looked at the east boundary where Trevor always crossed, right where my irrigation ditch ran parallel to the fence. We built a temporary crossing that looked normal, like ranch maintenance, strong enough for my ATV, strong enough for a person, but engineered very carefully with a weight limit. Bobby explained the math like he was talking about a bridge for a highway. Distributed load, dynamic stress, breakaway joints. Translation: it would hold what belonged there and fail under what didn't. I repositioned cameras, multiple angles. I set up recording gear. I made sure Deputy Martinez would be close enough to respond fast. And then I waited. Saturday night came with clear skies and warm air. Perfect for Trevor's little midnight property assessment. I was in the barn loft with night vision watching the road. At 11:47 p.m., headlights appeared. Not just an ATV, a side-by-side utility vehicle with two occupants. Trevor was the passenger. The driver was a bigger guy in work clothes, someone who moved like he knew heavy equipment. They stopped at the edge of my property and talked. And because life has a funny sense of justice, they talked loud enough for my equipment to pick up. "This is it," Trevor said. "Hit the irrigation first, then the electrical feed to the barn. Make it look like equipment failure." The driver muttered, "Your mom's paying me good money, but this is the last time. If anyone asks, I was never here." I keyed my radio. Calm voice, no drama. "Unit 7, we've got suspects actively committing vandalism on my property. Need backup." Martinez's voice crackled back, "Copy, ETA 5. Trevor climbed onto his red Yamaha like he was heading out for a joyride. He revved the engine, and I watched him take the exact path he'd taken for weeks, straight toward the crossing. He hit the bridge fast, confident, entitled. For a split second it held. And then physics did what physics does when someone exceeds design specifications. Support cables snapped. Breakaway joints popped. The bridge folded under him with a metallic crack, and Trevor's ATV pitched forward into 8 feet of cold irrigation water with a splash that sounded like karma landing in the mud. He screamed. Not a tough guy yell, not an angry shout, a pure shocked scream, the sound of someone discovering consequences exist. "Help! Help me. I'm stuck." The hired sabotage guy ran over with a flashlight, swearing under his breath. "Trevor, what the hell happened?" And that's when red and blue lights washed over my pasture like a patriotic thunderstorm. Patrol cars rolled in. Floodlights snapped on. My quiet ranch turned into a full-blown crime scene in about 30 seconds. I climbed down from the loft and walked out like I belonged there because I did. Stella arrived minutes later, flying down my driveway like her BMW had suddenly become a rescue vehicle. Except she wasn't dressed for rescue. She was in silk pajamas under a fluffy robe, hair thrown up in a messy knot, face twisted with panic and rage. She stormed toward Deputy Martinez, voice already at full volume. "Officer, I demand you arrest the man responsible for this illegal trap. My son was conducting legitimate property assessment when he was injured by this criminal's negligence." Martinez didn't even blink. "Ma'am, step back. We're processing a crime scene." "Crime scene?" Stella shrieked. "The only crime is that squatter attacking my son. I'm Stella Worthington, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA." And right then, like the universe was adding seasoning to the chaos, a local news van pulled up. Cameras, lights, a reporter stepping out like she'd been born for drama. Stella looked like she wanted to scream at the cameras too, but she couldn't help herself. She loved an audience. I watched her point at my barn, at my ditch, at my land, like she owned the air above it. And something in me went very, very still. Because it was time. I stepped forward. Not in jeans, not in flannel. I had gone back inside and put on my uniform. Badge, radio, duty belt. The full reality. And when I walked into that floodlight, Stella's face changed so fast it was almost funny. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, like her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. I let the silence stretch just long enough for the cameras to catch it. "Mrs. Worthington," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm Sheriff Tom Bridgewater." Her skin went pale. You're the sheriff." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Have been for 22 years. Trevor was still stuck in the ditch, soaked, flailing, yelling about his rights, but his voice didn't matter anymore. Because Stella finally understood every false 911 call, every threat, every legal stunt, every act of harassment. She hadn't been bullying some random rancher. She'd been harassing the county sheriff. On camera. In front of witnesses. With her own voice recorded. I turned slightly, looking at Martinez, then back at Stella. "Your son is under arrest for criminal trespass, vandalism, and conspiracy to commit property damage. And based on recorded threats and the evidence collected tonight, you're being charged as an accessory." The reporter shoved a microphone toward Stella. "Mrs. Worthington, did you know the property owner was the county sheriff when you filed your complaint?" Stella's voice collapsed into something small and broken. We thought he was just what, Stella? Just a man you could push off his land. Just trailer trash, like you called me the first time you got angry." Angela arrived then, stepping out of a car with a briefcase full of documents, like she was carrying the final nail in a coffin. She walked straight toward the cameras, eyes blazing. "Trevor Worthington has no legal right to custody of our children," she said, clear and steady. This whole thing was a scam. He wanted that land for development. They used my kids as props. Trevor's face, muddy and dripping, twisted into panic. Stella tried to speak, tried to regain control, but there was nothing left to control. Her polished image was cracking in real time. Deputies pulled Trevor out of the ditch and cuffed him. His expensive clothes looked like swamp rags. The hired sabotage guy was detained too, tools laid out on the ground like a catalog of intent hydraulic cutters, trenching gear equipment meant to cause damage that looked like an accident. And Stella. Stella just stood there staring at my badge like it was a curse. For months she'd tried to make my life so expensive I'd surrender. She'd tried to scare my brother back into darkness. She'd tried to weaponize children and courts and her precious HOA title. But in the end, all it took was the truth and a floodlight. I watched as Trevor was loaded into the patrol car, still yelling, still blaming everyone but himself. Stella's legal team hovered nearby, suddenly quiet, suddenly cautious, like they realized they'd been standing on the wrong side of a cliff. And as the car door slammed, as the sirens faded into the distance, I felt Eddie's hand on my shoulder behind me, small, shaky, but there. I didn't turn around. I just stared at the pasture, at the water rippling in the ditch, and I let myself breathe. Because the lesson was simple. Power only works on you if you hand it to them.